For decades, the entire global economy has basically run on this single, unified financial nervous system, a network that connects over 200 countries, moving trillions of dollars every single day. But what happens when that system gets turned into a weapon? Today, we're digging into how the world's most critical financial network, SWIFT, is now at the center of a geopolitical storm that could fracture the global economy for good.
And believe me, that is not an exaggeration. When the talk started about cutting Russia off from this system, that's exactly what it was called: a financial nuclear weapon. This tells you right away, this isn't just about banking anymore. It's about a whole new kind of warfare. And it begs a huge question. Can you really use a weapon like this and not expect your opponent to try and build one of their own?
So, how did we get here? See, for most of its life, everyone thought of SWIFT as neutral plumbing, just the phone lines for global finance, right? It's incorporated under Belgian law, and it was designed to be politically independent. But that whole idea of neutrality, it's been completely, and I mean completely, shattered.
And if you look at the timeline, you can see this clear pattern of escalation. It kicked off back in 2012 with Iran, and that was seen as this huge, unprecedented step. But then, fast forward to 2014, and suddenly the threat was on the table for Russia. And then, in 2022, boom, the nuclear option was finally used. Each step set a new precedent, turning a technical tool into a seriously powerful political lever.
But, this whole idea of an economic weapon, it's not actually new. Way back over a century ago, you had Woodrow Wilson talking about it, but he was thinking about things like naval blockades. Today, it's about shutting down the digital plumbing of global finance. The tools have changed, yeah, but the goal, it's exactly the same. Inflict enough economic pain to force someone to change what they're doing. And of course, every action has a reaction. This repeated use of SWIFT as a weapon, well, it has just destroyed the trust that held the whole system together. For countries outside that Western alliance, this terrifying thought started to sink in. Hey, if this can happen to Iran and Russia, it can definitely happen to us.
Try to look at this from Beijing's point of view for a second. They're not seeing U.S. policies as just friendly competition. To them, it looks like a full-on strategy of containment. So when they see something like the CHIPS Act, they're not thinking, oh, that's just about boosting American industry. No, they see it as a form of economic warfare. And so the logic for them becomes brutally simple. To survive, we have to achieve independence and self-reliance. We've got to build an alternative before we're forced to need one.
And this quote from a Shanghai-based academic, wow, it really just captures the entire mood. That whole idea of the peace dividend, that era of global cooperation after the Cold War, they see that as over. Done. The new assumption is conflict, and the number one priority is getting ready for a world that's basically split in two. So what do these alternatives actually look like? Because this isn't just a theory anymore. We're talking about multiple systems being built right now and scaled up with a very clear goal of creating a financial world that just doesn't depend on the West. Okay, so the biggest challenger out there is China's CIPS, and it's really, really important to get the difference here. SWIFT, remember, is kind of like a secure text messaging app for banks. It sends the instructions, but it doesn't actually move the money. CIPS, on the other hand, is more like the armored truck. It's a settlement system that actually moves the yuan. So think of it as China's version of the US chip system, not a one-for-one copy of SWIFT. And the growth? It's just staggering. Let's just run through the numbers here, one after the other. Back in 2021, CIPS processed almost $13 trillion. Okay, now jump forward just 2 years. That number leaps to over $17 trillion. That's a growth rate most financial systems can only dream about.
And the projection for 2024, we're talking nearly $25 trillion. The momentum here is absolutely undeniable. This is not some little pet project. It's a rapidly scaling reality.
And listen, this isn't just China going it alone. There's a whole coalition of countries pushing for this shift. You've got groups like BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and they've made it a central goal to trade more in their own currencies, to, bypass the dollar. The big strategy is to push ideas like the gas yuan, basically trying to price a critical global commodity in something other than dollars. And when you've got major energy producers and major energy consumers all in the same club, well, that idea starts to sound a whole lot more plausible. But, and this is a huge but, is it really that simple? Can you just unplug the old system and then, plug in a new one? The reality on the ground is way, way more complicated. So this is really the key question, isn't it? After everything we've seen, the weaponization, the broken trust, the rise of these powerful alternatives, it feels like the answer should be a simple yes. But there's a pretty big catch.
And here it is. This is the catch. For all its incredible growth, SIPS is not a true SWIFT killer. Not yet, anyway. And why is that? Because over 80% of its own transactions still use SWIFT for the messaging part. It's literally built on top of the very system it's supposed to be challenging. They're not decoupled at all. They're still deeply, deeply intertwined. And that's not even the only hurdle. Not by a long shot. First, you've got the US dollar's dominance. I mean, it's still used to price nearly 90% of global commodities. To really break away, you need a replacement for the dollar itself, not just the messaging system. Then there's SWIFT's massive network effect. For a bank, not being on SWIFT is like a business not having an email address or a phone number. You're just cut off. Even SIPS, as we saw, still uses the same international messaging standards as SWIFT, which makes it dependent. And Russia's alternative, this thing called SPFS, it's tiny in comparison, mostly just a domestic system. So overcoming these obstacles, it's not just difficult, it is a monumental task. So, okay, if a full replacement isn't happening tomorrow, what is happening? The future might not be the death of SWIFT, but something else entirely. Maybe something even more disruptive, the creation of a parallel system. A world where you have two financial networks existing side by side. This quote really just sums it all up perfectly. We're not talking about a small adjustment here. We're talking about tectonic shifts, the very foundations of the global financial system, things that have been stable for generations. They're on the move. And the end result isn't a single new system replacing the old one, but a permanent fracture right down the middle of the old one. And that leaves us with one final, pretty unsettling thought. You know how we have different internets now with different rules, like the Great Firewall of China? Well, are we heading towards a world with two different internets of money? A Western, dollar-based system and a parallel system centered on the East. And if we are, what happens when those two systems really start to compete? That's a question we might all have to face a lot sooner than we think.